We all get stuck in a situation where we need to film by ourselves. I've done it for many feature films, and so today I'm going to give you 5 easy tips on how to film yourself. So the first tip that I have is a focusing tip. A lot of people don't know how to focus by themselves. The best way to do that is to set something in the scene. In this case, I used this ring light and I focused on that, and then I moved the ring light a few inches forward because that's where I wanted it to be. I moved myself into that position. You can do this with a stick, you can do this with a chair, it doesn't really matter. As long as there's something where you're going to be placed, you can approximate the position of where your focus will be. Another tip that revolves around focus is deep focus. This is something I see a lot of people advocating against. A lot of people say that shallow depth of field gives you a lot of cinematic imagery, but I actually think deep focus is better for giving cinematic images, especially when you're filming alone, because it gives you the ability to have depth in your image. It allows you as an actor to be able to move within the scene without having to be restricted to a very thin line of focus. So if you're going to be making a movie by yourself or making a project by yourself, it would be very smart for you to have deep focus so that you're allowed to move within the scene and not have to worry about focus. Because if you're in the scene itself, you're not going to be able to go back and check the focus until the scene is over. So deep focus is definitely important, especially for like wide shots. The third tip I have is VFX. This is something I learned on my film Cheap Theater. One thing you can do to make it so that your scene is more cinematic is using visual effects. In a lot of cases, this can be done like a doppelganger effect. In the case of my film Cheap Theater, I used it for puppetry, so I had puppets moving around while I was staying still. This is something you can do for a lot of things. You can use it to remove things from your scene. All you have to do is basically film a clean plate, which is the scene you're going to film, on a tripod, and then put yourself into that scene. The clean plate will allow you to be able to remove anything if you use the masking tool. And this allows you to be able to put things into the scene like doppelgangers or puppets, or remove things from the scene, let's say something you don't want to be seen. It's a really helpful tool and can be even used to remove something like a light. Let's say you want to have this light in the scene very close to you. You could get a clean plate, remove the light, and then be able to still have that good lighting without it being seen within the shot. Tip number 4 is interesting locations. If you're gonna be the only person in the scene, you need to have interesting locations. In the case of my film Cheap Theater, I used my apartment, but I lit it very moody and interesting so that it felt very different than what it usually felt like. In the case of my film Watch Me As I Go, I ended up going to Myrtle Beach, and although it wasn't a film I shot entirely myself, it was a film where I was the only crew person, so I was able to use the interesting beach locations to give me a lot more cinematic quality to it. So I think if you're going to shoot by yourself, make sure that you're gonna find something that's gonna be visually interesting so that it kind of gives your film a little bit more oomph, especially considering you're gonna be the only person in the film. So I've tried to film this ending portion of this video 5 times and my cat will not stop meowing at me. So I am going to finish it with him. Tip number 5. You have to have a good story. Stories are why we are here to make movies in the first place. You can make the most cinematic footage, the most beautiful looking footage you can, but if it doesn't have a good story behind it, people aren't gonna care about it. That's why you gotta think about what you can do with one person. You're not gonna be able to do the next Avengers or some big budget movie. You have to think about it in a small scale. And for me, that's giving yourself a story that's on a small scale. Maybe it's one location, maybe it's a lot of locations, but it's all revolving around your character's like internal thoughts. Give yourself a story that you feel fits organically with how you're going to actually film it. Just don't make something that's going to be so hard to accomplish on your own that you won't be able to achieve it. So hopefully these tips were helpful. You can subscribe to my Patreon if you want to help fund some of my newest projects I'm working on, and you get some cool perks from that, as well as consider subscribing, leave a comment if you can, and say goodbye to Dove.